For 40 years, I woke up every morning thinking I was on the right path. I worked hard, sacrificed sleep, missed family gatherings, and convinced myself that success was just around the corner. I climbed the corporate ladder, shook hands with important people, and built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But one day, as I stared at my own reflection in the glass walls of my high-rise office, a terrifying realization hit me. I had spent my entire life chasing a dream that wasn't mine. This is my story, and if you're not careful, it could be yours too. Started in my early 20s, fresh out of college, full of ambition. I believed that success meant wealth, power, and status. I wanted to make my parents proud, prove my worth to the world, and live a life others admired. So, I chose a career that promised prestige, a high-powered corporate job in finance. The long hours, the ruthless competition, the endless pressure. I convinced myself it was all part of the dream. Decades passed. I hit milestone after milestone. Promotions, six-figure bonuses, luxury cars, a house that could fit 3 families. Yet, every success felt strangely hollow. I kept thinking maybe the next goal will finally make me happy. But happiness never came. The moment of truth arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper. I was sitting in my office late one night, exhausted and alone, flipping through old photographs. One caught my eye, an old picture of me in my 20s holding a camera, grinning from ear to ear. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Photography, that was my real passion. That was the dream I had buried under decades of spreadsheets, conference calls, and business meetings. I had spent 40 years climbing a mountain, only to realize I was on the wrong one. Starting over at 60, I could have ignored that moment, buried it under more work, convinced myself it was too late. But for once, I listened to that quiet voice inside me. I walked away from my career, sold my house, downsized my life, and picked up a camera again. It wasn't easy starting over at 60, but for the first time in my life I felt truly alive. Don't make my mistake. If you're reading this, ask yourself, am I chasing a dream that's truly mine? Don't wait 40 years to find out. Success means nothing if it doesn't bring you joy. Find your real passion now. Follow it fiercely, because the worst mistake you can make isn't failure. It's succeeding at the wrong thing. Starting over at 60 was terrifying. I had spent my entire adult life in boardrooms, not behind a camera. I didn't even know where to begin. Could I really turn a forgotten passion into something meaningful? At first, my hands trembled every time I picked up my camera. I felt like an imposter, an old man chasing a young man's dream. But as I started taking photos again, something shifted. The joy I had buried under decades of corporate life slowly resurfaced. I began traveling, capturing moments that felt real. Sunsets over quiet lakes, the laughter of strangers, the beauty in the ordinary. I wasn't making 6 figures anymore, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't working for a paycheck. I was working for my soul. Losing friends, gaining purpose. Not everyone understood my decision. Former colleagues called me crazy. Some friends drifted away, unsure how to relate to this new version of me. My own family questioned if I was throwing my life away. But as I let go of people who only valued my old life, I made room for those who saw me. Not my title, not my wealth, but my passion. I met artists, dreamers, travelers. People who, like me, had walked away from the expected path to chase something real. For the first time, my relationships weren't based on networking or status. They were based on shared dreams, on mutual respect, on something deeper than ambition. One day, a young photographer messaged me, saying my story inspired him. He was debating between a safe career and pursuing photography full-time. That's when I realized something powerful. My biggest mistake wasn't wasted time. It was a lesson, and that lesson could help others. I started sharing my journey online, speaking at events, mentoring young artists. My story, once a painful regret, became a guiding light for others struggling to choose between security and passion. What about you? I won't sugarcoat it. Starting over is hard. Walking away from everything you've built takes courage. But trust me, The only thing scarier than change is spending your whole life chasing the wrong dream. If you're reading this and feeling that same emptiness I once felt, don't ignore it. Don't wait 40 years. Take the risk. Follow your passion. Live a life that's truly yours. Because the worst thing you can do isn't failing. It's never trying at all. As I settled into my new life, I realized something profound. True fulfillment comes not from what you achieve, but from what you create. The moment I stopped chasing a dream that wasn't mine, I finally had the freedom to build something meaningful. I started small, photographing local events, capturing portraits for friends, and sharing my work online. At first, I wasn't sure if anyone would care. After all, I was a 60-year-old former businessman with no formal training. But slowly, people started noticing. My photos resonated with them, not because they were technically perfect, but because they had soul. One day, I received an email from a travel magazine asking if I'd be interested in contributing. Me, a man who spent 4 decades in boardrooms, now being asked to showcase my art, felt surreal. But that was just the beginning. For the first time, I was no longer counting days until retirement. My life wasn't measured in quarterly reports or stock prices. It was measured in sunrises, in laughter, in the click of a camera shutter capturing a moment that would never come again. I traveled to places I had only seen in magazines. Small villages in Italy, quiet temples in Japan, the vast, open landscapes of Iceland. Every trip, every photo, every interaction reminded me of what I had been missing all those years. And then, something unexpected happened. One evening, after a small photography workshop I was hosting, a young woman approached me. She told me she had been stuck in a job she hated for years, afraid to follow her passion for painting. My story had given her the courage to finally take the leap. That's when it hit me. My journey wasn't just about finding my own happiness. It was about helping others do the same. So I leaned in further. I started mentoring aspiring artists, sharing my experiences, teaching them not just how to create, but how to trust themselves. And with every person I helped, I healed a little more from my own regrets. I used to believe success was about status and wealth. But now I understand true success is about impact. It's about living in a way that inspires others to do the same. At 60, I started over. At 65, I became a mentor. At 70, I published my first photography book. And now, in my late 70s, I look back not with regret, but with gratitude, because I finally lived my dream. And if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. It's never too late to change your path. The wrong dream will never become the right one. But the right dream, that will change everything. So don't wait. Start now. Your real life is waiting. As the years passed, my passion for photography only deepened. But something else happened too. My definition of success continued to evolve. It was no longer just about capturing the perfect shot or seeing my work in print. It was about connection. I began focusing on people, not just places. Their wrinkles, their laughter, their quiet moments of reflection. Every face told a story, and I felt honored to be the one to capture it. In every frame, I saw echoes of my own journey. Dreams pursued, dreams lost, and the courage to start anew. And then, life threw me a curveball I never saw coming. One day, I received a handwritten letter from a man I hadn't spoken to in over 40 years. My college best friend, Daniel. We had lost touch when life pulled us in different directions. He had gone into academia and I had, of course, gone chasing corporate success. His letter was simple but profound. I saw your photos in a gallery last month. I can't believe what you've done with your life. You look happy. I can't say the same for myself. I followed the safe path too. And now I wonder, was it worth it? His words hit me hard. I knew that feeling all too well. I called him that night and we spoke for hours. He confessed that he had spent decades as a professor, never truly loving his work, always wondering what could have been. At 72, he feared it was too late to start over. I told him what I wish someone had told me at his age. It's only too late if you let it be. Daniel had always dreamed of writing a book, but he never found the time. So we made a pact. He would finally start writing, and I would photograph the places he had always wanted to visit. Together, we would create something that neither of us could have done alone. For the next 2 years, we traveled. I captured the world through my lens, and he captured it through his words. We laughed like we were 20 again, discovering life as if it had just begun. At 75, he published his first book, a collection of stories inspired by our journey. At 78, I held my first solo exhibition, featuring portraits of the people we met along the way. And at 80, we sat on a quiet beach, watching the sunset, knowing that we had lived life on our own terms. Now, as I write this, I know my time is shorter than it once was. But I don't fear the end, because I didn't just exist, I lived. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. Don't wait for permission to chase your real dream. Don't let fear, age, or expectations hold you back. Life will always give you reasons to stay where you are, but the truth is you are never stuck. You have time, you have a choice, and you have a story waiting to be written. So go, live it. At 82, I found myself staring at the ocean again, camera in hand, heart full of memories. The waves had become my oldest friends, constant, ever-moving, much like life itself. Daniel had passed a year earlier, peacefully, knowing he had finally lived his truth. His book had found its audience, and his words continued to inspire. I often wondered how many others out there were still trapped in lives they didn't love, believing the lie that it was too late to change. How many people sat in offices, in relationships, in routines that drained them, simply because they were afraid. I wanted to reach them, to shake them out of their sleepwalking. So I made one final decision: I would tell my whole story. Writing had never been my calling. I was a photographer, a traveler, an observer. But as I sat down to document my journey, I realized this wasn't just about me. This was about every person who ever felt trapped. Every soul that had silenced its dreams. Every regret that could still be undone. I wrote about the long years I had spent chasing the wrong things. About the wake-up call that changed everything. About the fear, the failures, the doubts, and the incredible freedom of finally living for myself. The book, titled Chasing the Wrong Dream, was published when I was 84. I didn't expect much. But then, something beautiful happened. Letters started pouring in. Messages from young professionals questioning their career choices. From retirees realizing they still had time. From artists who had buried their talents for too long. They weren't just reading my story, they were acting on it. Some quit their jobs. Some reignited old passions. Some simply found the courage to ask themselves, what do I truly want? And that, I realized, was the legacy I never knew I wanted. Now, at 87, I still wake up every morning with purpose. I may not travel as much, and my hands aren't as steady as they used to be, but my heart is full. I spend my days mentoring, teaching, reminding people that life is not a straight path. It's a canvas, waiting for them to paint it however they choose. One day soon, my time here will end. But I am not afraid, because I did not just survive this life. I lived it. And if my story reaches even one person who needs to hear it, then every wrong turn, every wasted year, every regret I once carried was worth it. So if you're still reading this, I'll leave you with one final question. What will you do with the time you have left? The older I got, the more I realized that time wasn't something to be spent. It was something to be lived. At 88, I had outlived many of my peers, but I never let that become a reason to slow down. If anything, I became more determined to leave behind something that mattered. My book had sparked conversations in places I never imagined. Universities invited me to speak. Young entrepreneurs reached out for advice. Even people in their 70s and 80s told me they had started over because they finally understood. It's never too late. And yet, despite all this, I knew one truth remained. No matter how much I had accomplished, no matter how many people I had inspired, my story would eventually end. The camera I once held so steadily would one day rest in stillness. My voice, now filled with passion, would one day fall silent. But the question lingered: what would remain? One afternoon, while walking through a park with my camera, I noticed a young woman sketching on a bench. She reminded me of myself when I was young, completely lost in her art, unaware of the world around her. I struck up a conversation, and she told me she had always wanted to be a painter, but was being pressured into a real career in law. She was afraid of failure, afraid of disappointing her family, afraid of choosing the uncertain path. I smiled because I knew that fear well. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out my old camera, the one that had traveled the world with me, the one that had captured my second chance. "Take this," I said, handing it to her. "Use it to capture what you love. And don't wait 40 years to chase the right dream." Her eyes filled with tears as she held it, as if she had just been given permission to live the life she had always wanted. And in that moment I knew I had done what I was meant to do. Now, at 90, I sit in my quiet home, surrounded by memories. Photos from every place I've been, books filled with stories I've told, letters from people whose lives have changed because I found the courage to change mine. I don't know how many days I have left, but I do know this: I will live every single one of them with purpose. Maybe this is my last story, maybe not. But if you're reading this, know that it was written for you. Take the risk. Follow your passion. Live with no regrets, because in the end, the only dreams that truly die are the ones we never dare to chase. At 91, the world had grown quieter around me. My legs didn't carry me as far as they once did. My hands trembled more often, and my eyesight, once sharp enough to capture the finest details, had softened with time. But my mind, my heart was as alive as ever. I still woke up with the same question: what will I create today? Each morning, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the light dance through the trees. I no longer traveled the world, but I had learned that adventure was not about distance, it was about perspective. Even in the smallest moments, there was beauty. Even in the simplest days, there was meaning. Then, one afternoon, I received a letter that would change everything. It came from a university in another city, where a group of students had been studying my book, Chasing the Wrong Dream. They had been inspired by my journey and wanted me to speak at their graduation. I hesitated. Travel wasn't easy anymore, and standing in front of a large crowd felt daunting. But then I thought of that young woman in the park, the one I had given my camera to. I thought of Daniel, who had written his book despite his doubts. I thought of the hundreds of people who had reached out to me over the years, saying my story had given them the courage to change their lives. How could I say no? So, I packed my bag. Lighter than before, just the essentials. My camera, though rarely used now, still came with me. It had been my companion through my second life, and I wasn't ready to leave it behind just yet. The auditorium was packed. Young faces, full of possibility. Parents, beaming with pride. Professors, standing tall, eager to see the next generation take flight. And then there was me. I took the stage slowly, my cane tapping against the wooden floor. The crowd fell silent, waiting. I cleared my throat and smiled. I spent 40 years chasing the wrong dream, I began, and another 40 living the right one. The best thing I ever did was stop believing it was too late. I told them about my past. The corporate job, the empty success, the moment I realized I had been climbing the wrong mountain. I told them about starting over, about fear and doubt, about the incredible freedom of doing what you love, no matter when you start. And then I left them with this: success is not about what you have. It's about what you become. And you will become the sum of the risks you take, the passions you follow, and the dreams you refuse to bury. So whatever it is you truly want, start now. Don't wait 40 years like I did. As I finished, the room erupted into applause. But the real reward came afterward. One by one, students came up to me, sharing their dreams. Some were on the path they loved. Others, I could tell, were still searching. But all of them, every single one, now knew they had a choice. And that was enough for me. I returned home, knowing my journey was nearly complete. My body was tired, but my heart was light. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of gold and violet, I sat in my favorite chair, my camera resting beside me. I didn't need to take a photo this time. Some moments are meant to be felt, not captured. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled. I had no regrets. I had lived, and that was enough. Though I may not be here much longer, I know this. My story will continue. In the pages of my book. In the photos I took. In the lives I touched. Maybe you're reading this, wondering if it's too late for you. Maybe you're stuck in a life that doesn't feel like yours. Maybe you're afraid to take the leap. But hear me now, it is never too late to change your story. Because life is not measured in years. It is measured in the courage to live it fully. So go. Live boldly. Chase the right dream. And when your time comes, may you smile knowing you, too, have truly lived. The days grew quieter, and so did I. My body, once strong and restless, now welcomed stillness. The world outside my window remained unchanged. The same rustling trees, the same golden sunsets, the same rhythm of life continuing, as it always had. And yet, I knew my time was nearing its end. I had spent my final years not in regret, but in gratitude. I had done what so many fear to do. I had started over. I had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind something that mattered. But there was one last thing I needed to do. With my trembling hands, I picked up my pen and began to write. To whoever finds this, if you are holding this letter, it means you are at a crossroads. Maybe you are stuck in a life that feels wrong. Maybe you are afraid of change. Maybe you believe it is too late for you. I once believed that too. But I was wrong. Life is not about the years you spend, it's about the choices you make. And you can choose right now to live for something real. Do not wait for the perfect moment. It will never come. Do not wait for permission. No one else can live your life for you. Take the risk. Follow your passion. Love fiercely. Because in the end, when all else fades, the only thing that will matter is whether you truly lived. Go. Live boldly. With love. A man who finally chased the right dream. I folded the letter and placed it inside my favorite book. Chasing the Wrong Dream. Knowing that one day, someone would find it. Someone who needed to hear these words. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat in my chair, camera by my side, watching the world bathed in its final light for the day. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool air, feeling the weight of a life well lived settle around me like a warm embrace. And as sleep took me, I knew I had left nothing undone. No dream unchased, no words unspoken, no regrets, just a story well told. And that was enough.